Hey Siri,
Yes?
find me a reliable and dedicated employee.
Here's a reliable and dedicated employee. Ta-da.
Wish it was that easy? It can be. Welcome to VMedX Podcast, your virtual assistant made easy at vmedx.com. And here's your host, the founder and CEO of VMedX, the Vladster.
All right, Vlad. So I think this is going to be our first episode of our podcast, and I'm very excited for us to be here and talk about the things that you have been through, for many years. So, why don't you tell the audience in here right now what you did in the past for the past 17 years, running a recruitment firm for IT, and things that you've experienced during that time.
Gotcha. Well, initially out of school, I went to work for a real estate company, which was a syndicator, and that lasted for till about a good 11 years. And then after that, I got involved in IT recruiting and IT placement. We would bring programmers to the United States, we'd acclimate them. They'd be already onboarded because the process would take quite a bit of time. We had to apply for government visas and all that stuff, so it wasn't like instant. So we'd bring them on stateside, and then we would acclimate them, and lots of them didn't even know how to drive, if you can imagine. So we would go through the whole processes, and while they were stateside, they would interview either locally, which would be face-to-face, or back in those days, they didn't have, Skype wasn't being used. It was a telephone call. So they would interview with a techie, and that techie would say, okay, this guy's got good skill sets. Let's hire them. And after that, we'd go through contract, and then we'd have to set up the logistics to move them there, or if it was local, then we would set up the logistics for that person getting back and forth to work.
It's crazy why you need to kind of like hire somebody, outside of the United States and bring them on board, especially IT services. I mean, how bad is the staffing shortage in the US during that time?
Well, apparently it was very bad because the government created quite a few studies, and there was a tremendous amount of shortage, but it was always one political party versus the other, saying that we need this many, and then they would bring it down to this many. Anyway, I think at the most I ever got in 1 year was maybe a dozen approved. And that approval took anywhere from 3 months to as much as 2 years. But this getting back to the shortage, it was ridiculous. There were so many companies, especially the big ones that were, doing development just before the dot-com crashed. They were doing so many development projects that they couldn't staff them. So in that market, if you had a good programmer or a good DBA, you were able to place that person. That person was your ace in the hole, and then you could go to the client, and the client would do everything to get that person on board, provided that the pricing was right.
Has it changed over the years, this shortage, staffing shortage in the United States? It seems to be an ongoing issue, even until right now in 2023, much worse in 2020 and 2021, the past few years. Is it still an ongoing issue right now, or is it being slowly resolved, as you speak?
If you read, the economic stats and all that stuff, you'll notice that not only is it in the high-tech arena, but it's also in the low-tech labor arena. So aside from all the illegals that have crossed in here, and the appetite for the domestic worker to do the labor work, in the farms and what have you, it is it's been a shortage. It's been a tremendous amount of shortage where companies are cheating, saying that yes, we did go through the approval process and they did meet it, and this is the person we're hiring, and um, that's just has not been affected. And now the last 2 years, I don't know how that it's affected in the lower, um, bottom of the food chain where you have the workers, but I still hear every once in a while that there's areas in the United States which have these perpetual problems, and the high tech area and I mean, just go to all the recruiting websites where there's, what is it, like 5 million jobs which are unfilled. So I don't think it's improved for sure.
The funny part is I worked in, medical practices over there in the United States. And what's funny is whenever I say, hey, why are you guys always, posting like, job positions available and stuff like that? I mean, there's a lot of people who's unemployed here in the US, particularly it was in Texas at that time. And they said, yeah, there's a lot of people, but there's less qualified people fit for the job. And that's just a medical assistant role. And I was like, really? Medical assistants shortage, with all of these people who you can train, governments can fund this and, they can get trained and then they can start working for different clinics and facilities. But, I think this is going to be a really serious issue from, over the next few years. What do you think about that?
Well, not only that, but there's also something called burnout. There's so many people that go into this field thinking that it's glorious and it's not stressful, and all of a sudden they get there and the hospitals and are so rigid that they burn themselves out. Plus, when you work for the hospital, you got to put in long hours. I mean, you get 4 days, but you're putting in over 40 hours easy, and you're getting paid for 40 hours, and you're under metric stresses all the time. You have to do this, you have to do that. This is your quota, and you're basically like a hamster on a wheel. So why have people just invested this tremendous amounts of money and said, this is not my cup of tea? There's got to be a reason behind that. It's either the hospitals are over demanding, or the people are getting burned out real easy. And I think it's probably the latter. I'm sorry, the former, because it's just a lot of burnout syndromes. Now, that said, you also have tremendous amounts of visas being applied for nurses and other healthcare professionals to come in from other countries, and mainly in the Philippines. From what I understand is that the major cities on both the coasts have as much as 1/3 of their nursing staff being Filipinos. So that's got to say something. Obviously, like everything else, when I was in the IT business, it wasn't just your competency; it was also your relativeness to accept a wage, which was probably, I would guess, at best marginal.
Yeah, well, in the past, I understand that, Filipino nurses are renowned for their hard work, work ethics, amazing personalities, especially when it comes to work, compared to most, people in the US working in different healthcare facilities. I think that's one of the reasons why people prefer outsourcing or bringing nurses to the United States. But what's interesting is because nowadays we don't really need to do that anymore. It's gone are those days, like you've mentioned. There was no Skype yet in the time. We didn't really have smartphones or stuff like that. So it was kind of like pretty much old fashioned or prehistoric. But these days, with the technology advancements, in today's modern world, it's quite easy for medical professionals from different countries, particularly the Philippines, would have the opportunity to work from home and basically work for different medical facilities in the US. I mean, you can get a nurse right now for like $10 per hour who could basically do your, triage, phone call triage. They can do, they can call insurance companies, call insurance companies, to check for verifications and stuff like that. And did you know that most of the insurance companies right now, like Blue Cross and Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Aetna, those companies are actually outsourcing the Philippines, and they're hiring medical professionals in the Philippines too. You've heard about that?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. Like I said, if you have to put someone there, it would cost you with, everything, soup to nuts. It's not just the wages, it's the taxes, it's everything you have to put into that employee. You're probably looking at around 32 an hour.
Right, right. And that's the thing. If insurance companies are already doing this for years, since probably it's when 2012 or even earlier than that, I think it's high time that most businesses, especially healthcare practices in the United States, should start adapting the fact that we should start, utilizing, outsourcing and, hiring people from the Philippines to help out with the tasks. Because aside from, of course, minimizing the burnout rate, you're basically saving money and getting the staff that you need. And the attrition rate, and the turnover rate in hiring, Filipino staff is way lower than hiring somebody from the United States. You spend so much in training in the US, you spend so much in training, giving all of these employee benefits, paying the parking tickets, and a lot more, lawsuit risks and stuff like that. But hiring in the Philippines, you get somebody when you pay like $10 an hour, and they can do all of these work, that people in your clinic, actually do. So I think there's a really, really, that's one of the advantages of really outsourcing. And I think people should really, think outside of the box these days. I like your story, Vlad, one time when you remember the time that you mentioned about that deal that you were trying to close, a lawyer, that $60,000 visit or something. That was an
Yeah.
outside of the box thinking. So why don't you kind of like share more about that story?
Well, that was when I was in the real estate business, and that took place in Nacogdoches, Texas. I was tasked to go there and close a deal, small apartment complex. I think it was something like 50 units, but I was asked to do it, and I went there, and the buyer hadn't closed in a year, so it was just, we kept on extending, um, the contingency period for closing, but the due diligence period expired long ago. So when I got down there, I thought everything was in order. Later, did I find out not so? The buyer, who was a relatively young multimillionaire who made his fortune on the oil business back then, and he was buying that apartment as a tax shelter. Back then, there were tax shelters, and he refused to close due to the fact that we hadn't fixed everything to do with the pool repairs, which under no circumstances were we obliged or legally compelled to do so, because they did their due diligence period, and it expired, and they continued to extend the closing date until I got there, and they said to me, "We're not closing. We're not closing unless you, fix the pool stuff." And I said, "Wow." I mean, we went through it over and over again. The attorney said, legally speaking, you guys don't have a leg to stand on, that kind of stuff. But they said, we'll just walk away and you can keep the nominal deposit. I think it was probably $25,000 back then. So I was a little taken back. I thought this was going to be a closing, and all of a sudden you're shot right there in the eyes with it's not a no-go. It's not as easy as you think it was, and you start pondering what's going on. I asked for a little break from the conference room, went to go call my boss up, and he said, under no circumstances can you come home without the deal being done. So I said to myself, wow, what am I going to do? And I came back there, and I think the concessions were worth about $60,000, back then. And I looked them straight in the eye. The buyer says, how do we resolve this? My attorney says, no go. You say no go. Do you guys really want to walk away from it? You guys travel from Louisiana. Of course, not that much as I traveled from. But do you not want this apartment complex? I thought there was a great tax shelter for you. He looked at me and he said, do you drink? And I said, why, yes, I do. What do you have in mind? He looks at me and says, let's have a drinking contest. Let's see who wins. And that person who wins gets the concession or does not accept the concession and doesn't have, you guys don't have to pay for it. Depends on who wins. And I said, what do you drink? And he said, liquor, like vodka, bourbon, tequila. I didn't drink that much back then. So, but I also know that my boss told me that if you don't close this deal, it's a failure. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try to figure something out. And I agreed. I gave my hand and said, well, what's the worst thing? We lose $60,000 and I get drunk and, maybe have to go to a hospital. So it was just like, what can we do? So I said, okay, where and when? And he told me later on at 6:00 that day. And it was someplace there in Nacogdoches. Nacogdoches is not that big. It's probably gotten bigger since then. And after leaving the conference room, I went down to that restaurant and spoke to the manager. And the manager said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, who's going to be working the shift here around 6:00? He said, oh, that's the same gal there. I said, can I speak to her? Yeah, absolutely. So I went and talked to her and I said, here's the deal. Here's $100 for you right now, for good consideration. And I want you to follow the script. And I'm coming in here at 6:00. And if you follow the script, you get another $300 tip. Now, let's recall back then, $400 was a week's pay. Anyway, so I showed up at 6:00. They showed up. The buyer brought his attorney, who was a Texas attorney, who was also very good at drinking. So we sat down and he said, I want bourbon. And I told him I want vodka. And the gal brought 5 shots each. We toasted the first one saying good luck. And we started drinking. Now, this guy was a professional drinker. He was just shooting them down one after another. The first 5 shots, I gotta believe, didn't take him more than 2 minutes, maybe faster. And those were 1.5-ounce shots. I remember that clearly. And I'm slowly catching up to him. 5 are gone. And he says, 5 more. I said, okay. We got the waitress. She brought 5 more. So he keeps shooting them down. And I keep sipping them down, and talking and, all this other stuff. But it got to a point where we were 15 shots old and he started slurring. I saw that. And I told him, I'm feeling really, really drunk. And he looks at me one more time. He says, another 5. And he's slurring. So I figured out, hey, the alcohol's starting to finally take a little effect. And the waitress brought the 5 shots each. And after his second shot, which would have made it, I think, 17, he excused himself and went to the bathroom to throw up. So I won. Well, I guess I know what you're thinking. Maybe I didn't play by the rules, but either did he. So I just basically was improvising, adapting, and overcoming the situation.
And then what happened? You got drunk? You won the deal?
The next day, since I was declared the winner, well, first of all, I didn't pay the tab, which was great. And The next day we closed. There wasn't a mention of giving concessions, and I signed everything. The deal was done. It was going to be wired to our account back in New York City. And our attorney, who said that was absolutely a stupid move you did. You were so lucky to win. Right. So I said, okay, but we walked out with the ink and the money, and that's all that counts. They didn't play fair, and that's the way it is. So um, I came home at least with a victory.
Well, we do whatever it takes, to win, even cheat a
But
little bit.
but it wasn't really cheating. It was just okay. Here's the key. The $400 was an incredible tip, obviously, but it wasn't just a tip. It was for her when she sent the vodkas down to me. They were just water. So I wasn't getting drunk at all. I was just putting on the theatrics, and um, unfortunately, I had to go that route, but everything ended up good for both of us. They bought a good property, and we sold it, and we needed the cash then, and we walked away.
You're right. You're right. It wasn't cheating. It was just like thinking outside of the box, right? I mean,
you had to improvise. They weren't following the rules, so
right, right.
they were trying
If
to
such,
ram us with something that we didn't have to comply with, and well,
yeah,
and I didn't even
if
suggest the drinking.
if the situation doesn't work for your favor, you improvise, right? So,
That's true.
right. I think that's something that we could learn from as well in today's, situation where there's shortage in labor. Minimum wage has increased a lot. You can't find great staff. You could either get drunk with all of these, crazy things that's happening around you, or you improvise. And one of the improvisations that I could actually think of is, basically hiring, somebody from like different countries like Philippines, bringing them over to the States, or better yet, let them work virtually, let them get, the administrative tasks done in the practice while you utilize or you offset the physical labor to the staff that you would hire from the United States. I think that's a pretty fair deal. Something that you could do these days because of modern day technology. So yeah, so why don't you go ahead and promote your company right now, Vlad? Company that you put up, and
Okay,
let's tell the
so
audience here.
speaking of all these things you said about virtual assistants, the company VMedX is a virtual assistant company, and we do provide services to medical practices and medical clinics. We do it very affordable. It's really a win-win-win because the people we use, mainly from the Philippines, get a very good wage. They don't have to travel. They work out of their house. The practice in turn gets a very effective wage. It's probably 65% less than they would if they would have to hire someone there on site. And not only that, but most of the tasks that our virtual assistants do is menial and follow-up tasks, which could involve hanging on a telephone for 30 to 45 minutes. Now, who in the right mind, if you're working in a practice and you got all these things going around you and interruptions, is going to be able to do that? It's quite tough. I mean, receptionist, medical scripting. I mean, all the stuff which I would consider to be tactical, probably is a good way of use a virtual assistant to do tactical. Anything strategic, which involves much more thought and experience, then you keep that with your staff on site. But the other stuff will be taken care of, and you get a progress report, and you can see what's going on. And as everything is in business and in medical practice, it's just moving the ball forward. If you move it effectively and much better, then you're going to be more effective at bringing in more patients, more revenue, more profit, whatever you want to call it. Plus, you're cutting back your costs at the same time, and you're outsourcing, the items which are very menial, common sense. and are much easier to do from a remote area where you're not being interrupted, as opposed to in the middle of an office with 5 or 6 people around you doing all these different things. So that's why I founded this company, is to provide the service for these medical practices and clinics so that they can leverage and use their on-site HR to do what they have to do, which is basically strategic, and then just outsource the tactical, which is, very basic, but will be done, and will be done very effectively. I mean, how many times do you hire someone, to do 15 tasks, and they're all just menial? Call the bank, do this, go, all that stuff. But in our case, you get, an audit trace of everything that happens. So what happens. You don't drop the ball when you have everything documented. So not only that, this company also is using the latest CRM technologies, which I really call CCRM, which is contractor client resource management. And by automating all these processes, it allows our executive staff to manage the virtual assistants and the clients much better. So we're not spending time moving data or making sure this is done and that is done, which is also a menial, and we were able to automate it. So that provides a better scale of economies, and that's why we price in everything we do to be as effective as possible. And that's why I call it a win-win side. The virtual assistant wins, we win, and the client wins.
And a win-win and a no-brainer. No-brainer for people to
triple win.
Right, triple exactly. Win. All right, guys. So anyway, we're running out of time, but thanks for staying in tune in this podcast. This is just one of our few episodes. Thank you very much to Vladster for coming here, and we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, thank you so much. Take it easy.
Welcome to the future of healthcare staffing. Do more and be more with VMedX. Visit us at www.vmedx.com.